I am joined today, as usual, by Anne Laure Jackson. Hello, Anne.
Hello, great to be here. Good to see you.
But we're not actually going to see each other in person this week, which now feels strange.
It's like it's my brother across the screen. It's just like, oh no, no. But yes, I will cope.
If you are wondering what we're talking about, so Anne Laure Jackson, two of her sons, joined us at Big Church Festival a couple of weekends ago, and then last week, late last week, early last week, I met Anne and another two of her sons, well, one and another one, at Teach Camp at Kefenley in Wales. So we got to do last week's interview live with distractions, which I absolutely adored.
It was just something. I don't think I'll ever. I think it's the first time I've been face to face with someone in an actual interview like that, and it was just really precious. There is something really lovely about meeting people face to face, and no matter how much I love Zoom, and no matter how much I do all my stuff on Zoom, I don't think anything will ever replace. Just being there with someone, and seeing them, experiencing them, sensing them in all ways, and responding to that appropriately, or hopefully appropriately.
I was having, I've shared this, but it was a conversation I had at Big Church with somebody else who said, it's getting to the point where, ooh, it's not just a headshot. It's not just a head and the top of the shoulders. There's like, arms and legs to this person as well. And it's sort of coming out almost, it feels like a little bit coming out of COVID, coming out of the digital thing of there's people out there, living, breathing people, and we can actually see them not on a screen.
It was so weird though when you think that someone's really tiny and you see them in real life and you think, oh, crumbs! That was just not what or who I expected. So yeah, it's good.
Well, let's start there then. Digital communication and senses. It's a sensible place to start, I think, because COVID happened. All of a sudden, people who would have gotten used to the idea of digital communications, I'm thinking more perhaps commerce, where you digitally chat with somebody across the other side of the world for business, and now everybody and their dog literally is using Zoom to communicate.
Mm. Powerful, very hard to do in a group setting. This all the social nuances, all the social norms, all the little sights and movements and posture changes and all the rest of it. The peripheral vision that we use in normal communication, all of that disappears because you are flat. It is all on screen and it is so much harder. It is a new skill to learn how to communicate, especially in a group setting. I mean, one to one, there's still that, are they talking to me? Are they not? Especially visually, where you're looking. Are you looking at the camera or are you looking at the person? That there's, again, peripheral vision is used in a very different way when you're on screen to when you are in a real social situation.
I discovered something I didn't know because it's not something I've done before. I'd had the odd video chat, maybe on a mobile phone, usually with my family, which is a completely different kind of context. All of a sudden, COVID happens and you're having these digital conversations. And I discovered that I felt quite physically sick if I was in a group Zoom. And I,
Right.
I, I literally couldn't cope. I had to walk away. I had to mute it. I couldn't cope with and this is something I found actually recognized in other parts of my life. I can't cope, for example, if we've got our radio playing in the house, because digital devices are never going to be perfect. You might have like a half-second delay. And I literally feel sick and agitated that I'm
Yeah.
hearing the same thing just a little bit apart. And that essentially is exactly what happens in a group Zoom meeting where someone says hello and you've got 30 people saying hello, all slightly different. And although I love groups and communicating, in a digital context, I'm curious why it is that I felt so physically sick and still do actually. If it's a group Zoom, I have to really have to be there, or I just send somebody else because I can't do it.
Mm. I think there is too much going into our auditory and visual sense, and if there's any delay, if there's any, we are not designed to communicate in 2D. We really aren't. There's so much that we can do, and that's really positive. But we are 3D beings, and we perceive, we move, we understand the world in a 3D space. So that conflict that comes sometimes with, or the um, overwhelming input through one or two senses, which is not how we normally communicate, it just sends the body into that flight or fright, which is that kind of nauseous feeling. It just has that impact on the body. And then, yeah, some people just can't cope with that. It's just too much. It's not pleasant. It's not normal. There are social anxieties for different reasons, but it's a very different kind of Zoom. Not quite anxiety, but it is an unpleasant, overwhelming experience with not being able to integrate the information coming from the senses, because it is a very foreign way of receiving that input from the digital space.
If there's, I've had done an interview with two people on the same camera, same microphone, absolutely no problems whatsoever. But when I've had to do group chats in the past, I mean, I actually would say I was anxious. I got really anxious beforehand because I knew I was going to be feeling physically sick. I was going to be struggling so badly with it, that I would do everything in my ability not to attend one, because I just can't cope. And it's not the group setting, it's not the visuals. For me, it's all the different people speaking at the same time with a bit of a delay, and that causes me issues. Now, I had a phone call yesterday with a really bad delay. Don't know why, it's just a phone call. It's like a 7-8 second delay. Although it was difficult, I didn't feel physically sick or anxious from it. But if you throw in the digital visual part as well, all of a sudden I'm anxious. I really am, and then I get feeling physically sick, and
Mm.
I don't engage in a good way at all. Which for somebody who communicates digitally is frustrating, but it's also not something I would routinely do.
And that's great to know where your boundaries are and what works for you from a sensory health perspective. So firstly, we would want to be equipping and getting you in a good place physically, but there's lots going on, and it's for you, and therefore it is basically, you're just wise in saying, actually, that's not going to be a good fit for me. Or if we don't have good audio and visual, if they're not synced well together, then we'll just leave the recording to another time. It really isn't worth your health, your sensory health, for putting yourself through that experience, for what, at the end of the day, when you can postpone it for another time.
Whereas at Teach Camp, I had three people in front of me, plus myself, plus I had a phone that with messages from my office, plus I had people walking around, and I was absolutely loving every single second of it. I'm very relaxed and very happy. But if
Yeah.
you throw those things into a digital visual mix, now I can't cope.
Mm. And those are the things that we need to learn and accept, that that is how we function, and to work with it, and to embrace it. There are certain things that we change, certain things that we go along with, and just recognize and say, yeah, no, this is not going to work. It's not going to be the best for me, and let's do something different.
Yeah, I don't do well at the whole accepting thing. I suppose it's the admittance of, I don't know, boundaries or restrictions, not quite right the wording, but when I can't do something, sometimes
Mm.
I'm not very good at accepting I can't, because I think, but everybody else seems to be able to, and I can do it in this context. Why can't I do it in this situation? So I should be able to cope. So then the shouldas and the couldas come out, which are usually not very good.
Mm, And that's, I think, where there has been this whole push. I was chatting yesterday with some people in the mental health services, because the sensory super system is moving into the mental health arena, and working with our friends in mental health services. And we were having this discussion about the whole neuro affirming push that there is. And on the one hand, it's absolutely brilliant that everybody is celebrated for their differences. But actually, no, there's a time, especially as a therapist, that why would you want someone to live in any kind of anxiety? Because it does produce anxiety. People are not well. People are not healthy with certain aspects of things that go on. So it's like, let's not just think, oh yeah, it's great, everybody's completely different, and we do honor people, but we also need to treat, if we can, to help people's lives be better, because it really isn't fun to have those anxieties. It's not fun to be a little bit more, to be more clumsy than others. It's not fun to fly off the handle when you really don't want to, because you recognize that ultimately those things hurt people as well. Sometimes you recognize you feel unpleasant, but you can also make other people feel unpleasant too.
And I
That's,
guess a spin-off would be, if we're not careful, we end up celebrating that difference, which actually is not healthy. So, well, this is where I am, therefore accept me. And I've heard people say that. Oh, yes, I'm just very rude when you meet me. You just have to accept it.
mm,
No, that's not okay. Or I get nervous about situations. No. It's not okay to be rude and aggressive and abusive just because you're not okay with the situation. The fact that you are like that means there's something wrong that you need to deal with, because actually, that's not okay. That isn't something we should be celebrating. But I've heard actually had a conversation. I was dumbfounded. Oh, you just have to accept this is the way I am. And I thought, well, actually said, no, I won't. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is, yeah. Right. Now, I had a question here, which I thought was brilliant. Um, Completely changing from digital stuff. Swings and slides. So the question goes like this. My child likes a slide, but not the swing. Why?
Yes. This is a great one. This hits at the core of our vestibular system. So our vestibular system is those mechanisms on the inside of our ear that tell us whereabouts we are in space and our relationship to gravity. So it seems really weird. Children will go on certain things, but they won't go on others. And you're thinking, it just doesn't seem to make sense. But it does make sense when you understand what the vestibular system is and how it works and what its impact is on how we move and how we feel about things. So if you're on, because it was the slide, wasn't it? They could do the slide, but not the swing. So sometimes you have them other way around, and then we have to work out what's going on with the body and the senses. So if they're on a slide, you are actually fully supported. You go up the steps, you can hold on, you can get yourself up, you can reposition your legs, and at all points, you are connected to something that is connected to the ground. As soon as you go on something like a swing, your feet are off the ground and you are moving through space on a swing that is not in and of itself connected to the ground. So that is what we call a gravitational insecurity. There is a sense of what happens in gravity. The vestibular system just isn't picking up that information well at all. So it causes anxiety, it causes a lot of fear, can be quite panicky, or there'll be complete avoidance. That's why, you have a child avoiding that. No, I'm not going to go on the swing, but they'll happily go on the slide. So anything that is connected to the floor, they're likely to be happier with because they can trust their body in space because it is connected to something that is connected to the ground. As soon as you take their feet off the ground, then it's a different story because they are having to connect to their vestibular system to tell them whereabouts they are in space, literally. Even though they're not far out in space, they are literally in the world of space and not connected to the ground. So it's a real thing. It is a vestibular issue, and we call it a gravitational insecurity. So we would want to work on their vestibular system so they can register that input better, so that they can relax and feel secure and happy in doing things where their feet are off the ground.
You see, I like a swing if it's gentle, but there's the moment on a swing, isn't there, where all of a sudden gravity stops because now you've swung up. You're just at that. I can feel it in my stomach now. You're just about that point to drop down, and all of a sudden there is no control because you are literally floating momentarily. So although you can feel the slide, you can feel the change, you can see everything around you if you're sighted. There's that moment of, and here we go again. And it's that bit that for me as an adult, I just think, no, I'm good, thanks. I like the little gentle bit. That's nice. But when we get too far, I'm good, thanks.
Yeah. And again, good on you. It's just like we all need to find those moments of, yeah, I'm happy with this, but actually no. And let's hold those things too. But that is that complete lost in space, literally. Yeah, as you say, you're in between. You're kind of like paused. You're neither up nor completely down. It's just like, oh, my stomach's in one place and the rest of my body's in somewhere else. So yeah, your poor vestibular system today. So I hope we'll have to do some deep pressure exercise and some deep breathing at the end of this. Otherwise, you're going to feel really ill at the end of this podcast. So it's like, yeah.
I'm happy being an example. If it'll help others, that's great. It's fine. But no, yeah, a little swing is nice. It feels good. Whether my feet are on the ground or not, just happily swinging. The breeze is in you. Well, I haven't got a lot of hair, but it's nice. But I remember watching a thing actually about roundabouts, which is slightly different again, and that children are better able to cope with a roundabout spinning very, very fast. Richard Hammond did it, sciencey things, and he had some children and adults on a little roundabout, and the adults basically were getting off and throwing up. Whereas the children were like, yeah, faster. What happens between children and adults that means that the children are okay and adults are perhaps not so?
Yeah. There is a maturing. There is an integration of our senses. And that whole development, that spinning, that real intense vestibular, because that's the semicircular canals in the vestibular system that are being stimulated there, and you're swinging, your light swinging, your utricles and your saccules. So there's different areas within the vestibular system that are being stimulated. And linear vestibular is gently very calming. That's why you will see lots of people, we call it stimming, but like where they will rock, because it is calming. They might be anxious in their system and they will rock to calm themselves. Some people will rock to alert themselves. But most folk do it because it's a very calming. It is a nice thing, as you say, just the breeze in your hair as you have your nice little swing. But for rotation and for children, that's the biggest thing. It is huge, and we need to get the vestibular system starting to register input. Lots of really, really good stuff is happening through all of that spinning. For some, it will make them very sick very quickly. For some, it will make them quite disorientated. For some, it will make them more clumsy. It'll make them more disorganized. So we do have to watch spinning. But for others, and for the most part of most children, they do need an element of spinning because the vestibular system, children are there to mature their systems. And it just shows that their systems are not yet mature. And it's developing a whole range of different things. It's developing our language ability. Ironically, we're spinning, and yet it's helping with communication. All those neural pathways are being stimulated. It's helping muscle tone. It's helping bilateral coordination. There are so many things that are involved in the vestibular system. And that's why children, it's really important that we have play parks that do use all of the vestibular inputs to help the brain mature and develop and set off good developmental pathways in the brain for growing up and maturing well.
I will say, as a parent, I'm very glad. As much as I loved some of the earlier playgrounds with the concrete floors, as a parent, I'm really glad that when my children were growing up, there were more these. It wasn't quite as good as it is today, but there were softer landing zones, shall we say? So I remember getting off roundabouts and just falling over. And if you land on gravel, it hurts, and you have, scrapes and scabs. But although that can be quite exciting at school, look at my scab. It's not so fun at the time, is it?
No, it's not. No, I think we are coming. We're coming in leaps and bounds, and I think the different types of vestibular, especially the different types of vestibular stimulation and the different types of vestibular equipment is coming in. One of the schools I was working at said, "Look, can you help us design a playground?" And I said, "Well, yeah, absolutely, I'd love to." And they said, "Well, where do we start?" And I said, "We have to start vestibular. Let's look at all the rocking, all the rotations, all the different head positions, because we want the vestibular system to be as integrated as it possibly can. And then the next is, what can we do for muscle work? Because many of our play spaces are designed with safety in mind. And I'm thinking, apart from the fact, yes, we don't want concrete, for folks to land on. So there is an element of good safety, and so therefore softer landings are brilliant. But let's not make them so clinical that basically all everybody has to do is walk up a ramp and walk down the other side, and they walk on this balance path, and which is about 1 meter, 1 centimeter rather, off the ground, and it's that safe that actually you're not really helping the brain develop. Play parks are there to develop the nervous system, because that's why we have play parks for children. And we don't really have play parks for adults, although I would argue there is a place for that. And I do think for our teens as well, it's really, really important that they have big play spaces to be able to play in. And that's what, in fact, my centre just opened a centre on the island here. I can't get insurance, so if anybody does know anything about insurance for have an indoor play space, I just want folks to be able to have risk, but risk that is assessed, risk that is allowed, because it helps the brain develop properly.
Is My mind's now going in a slightly different direction, but I think of the classic image of someone in their 60s, 70s, 80s on a rocking chair on the veranda outside their house, and they sit and they rock and all that. Is that to do with, is there some sort of, particular health benefit as we get into our 60s, 70s, 80s, where that's a good thing? Because I've got a little, it's not a rocking chair, it's sort of a loungy thing that can bounce a bit. And I really love it. I can just sit and just gently bounce a bit. But what's with the stereotypical image of an older person in a rocking chair on a veranda? Is there some, sensory stuff behind that?
Yeah. It's a really good one, especially when the rest of the body, as they get older, even getting up out of a chair is much more effort than what it used to be. They may not be able to walk the distances they can. So, but the brain still needs fed. The brain still needs input. But if you're sedentary, you're not getting very much input at all, and it doesn't help your brain. It doesn't help your thinking processes if you are sedentary and if you're just sitting in a seat all day. So if there is anybody that has any physical disabilities, I really would look at seeing what you can do, that finding something that you might sit on that might bounce, or that might rock, or that might tilt, finding a seating option that gives you more vestibular input, because that's exactly what rocking chairs are doing. They are still keeping the brain alert. They might be calming them, but most older people will just be doing it, I think, more for the alerting aspect of it. It is a calming, it is rhythmical, but it also is just giving their brain stimulation when they actually can't get it by going on long walks, or by going riding a bike, or things that they would have done when they were younger. So it keeps the brain alert, but not too physically taxing because they're older, but it is still stimulating the brain in a very pleasant way.
We had, when Stephen was born, who's now 20. Sorry, Stephen, if you're listening. We had it was like a baby seat thing, but it was on a frame, like a tripod thing, like a triangle, and it would just gently rock him on a motor. And we loved that thing. And when the motor died, we were really upset, and so was he, because that gentle rocking motion used to send him to sleep. But I'm looking back at that now and thinking, well, if it helps with the alerting in older folk, why did it help someone younger not to actually be alerted, but go the opposite way to sleep?
Because linear vestibular ultimately is a very calming force. It is, and that when it's rhythmical like that, especially when it is on a timer, then it is something to calm the systems. And children, babies need regulating externally because they can't yet. They don't have that self-regulation yet. That's why we have dummies, or they have dummies, because they can't use their thumbs. They can't use the oral motor to regulate themselves. When they're a little bit older, the hand goes in the mouth. They might be able to suck a little bit with their fingers, but the thumbs don't go in until they're actually coordinated enough to get the thumb in, and therefore we use that, or they use that, as a regulating tool. There are many things that we do. We swaddle them, so we give them deep touch pressure. The rocking is that calming organization to help reduce arousal levels in their system and allow them to go to sleep. Older people, then their systems are that way, so developed, and that they are not getting much else input. But it also depends on the system. You might find some of our older people will be snoozing. You know, that they'll rock for a bit and then they'll snooze, and then they'll be up again, and then they'll rock for a bit longer. Depends on the systems, but there's a lot of time that it is used to alert when the rest of the body isn't able to be doing the alerting of the system itself.
I really do enjoy our conversations because we've covered newborns and toddlers on playgrounds or in rocking chairs. We've looked at older folk in their retirement on a rocking chair. My issues with Zoom and group chat. I love how when we start these, there's no script for this, and I love the fact we can just navigate as it goes off the random firing of my brain, pretty much. Right, there you go. Thank you, Anne, for another. I love these. I really do. And it was a thrill actually meeting you in person for our first proper face-to-face interview without distance between us. So that was great. If you want to know more about Anne Laure Jackson, if you've got any questions, and if any of the things we talked about today is causing you more questions, like, ooh, can I get this for my elderly parents? Is a rocking chair really a good idea? What sort? All those sorts of questions, you can fire them back at us and I will put them to Anne Laure Jackson. But if you want to know more about how to connect with Anne Laure Jackson directly, go to our website, pure247radio.org, pure247radio.org/ALJ, and that'll have all the links to Anne and all the work that she does. Anne, thank you so much. These are such a joy to me. I love that I now feel more empowered when someone invites me to a group chat saying, no, sorry, not my thing.
Yes.
Anne said
Thank
so.
you. And said so. That's right. It's like, oh no, thank you, brother. I love these. Brilliant. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.